My stepson's friend brought pizza to our door, but what he delivered was far more dangerous. He left with a secret smoldering between us, one I didn't dare speak, but couldn't forget. I'm Carla. I turned 48 in May, but I stopped celebrating birthdays after 45. Something about lighting candles on a cake I baked for myself started to feel a little ridiculous. I live in a quiet, leafy neighborhood outside Denver in a house that used to feel like home. Now it feels like a carefully curated museum of a life I no longer live, framed photos, spotless counters, and that eerie stillness that only exists when nobody really talks anymore. Mark, my husband, is 58. He used to make me laugh so hard I couldn't breathe. Now I can't remember the last time he looked up from his iPad when I walked into the room. We haven't been intimate in almost 2 years, not that I'm counting. But sometimes I lie awake and stare at the ceiling, wondering when exactly we stopped reaching for each other in the dark. We're not angry. We're just faded. I gave up my interior design business 5 years ago when my father got sick. I thought I'd return to it once things settled down, but they never did. Days turned into years. Now I pass the time reorganizing the pantry, repainting trim, folding laundry, and watching old movies with dialogue that makes me ache for a time when people really said what they felt. The only real spark left in this house comes in waves, when Jeremy, my stepson, comes home from college. He's a bright, funny, golden-hearted 22-year-old who never fails to kiss me on the cheek when he walks through the door. He still calls me Mom, even though I married his father when he was already a teenager. It's the one tenderness in my life I can count on. But last weekend, something happened that I didn't see coming. Something that shifted the floor beneath my feet. It was a windy Friday in late October. The kind of autumn day where the sky feels low and gray and the air smells like firewood and dry leaves. Jeremy had texted earlier to say he'd be home around 7 and was bringing a couple of friends for the weekend. I was making chili, lit a few cinnamon candles, folded the throw blankets just so. It's silly, but when Jeremy visits, I pretend I still have a reason to host people. Like the version of me who used to plan dinner parties might come back for a night. At 6:40, the doorbell rang. I opened the door with a smile, expecting Jeremy. But it wasn't him. He stood there, tall and quiet, wearing a black hoodie and holding 2 pizza boxes and a 6-pack of some local IPA. His hair was dark, a little tousled, and his jawline was dusted with stubble. Not a boy. Not quite a man either. Somewhere in that in-between space where charm and danger meet. Jeremy's running late, he said. He asked me to drop this off. I stepped aside, heart skipping just a little. You must be Dominic. That obvious? I laughed, a little embarrassed. He's mentioned you. Said you're the quiet one. Dominic's eyes met mine, gray-blue, unreadable. That's one way to put it. He stepped into the foyer and glanced around, his gaze lingering on the mantel, the framed wedding photo, the flickering candlelight. Cozy place. Thank you, I said, smoothing my sweater, suddenly self-conscious. He carried the boxes to the kitchen like he'd been here before, like it was the most natural thing in the world. But he hadn't. I would have remembered. You want something to drink while you wait? I offered. He gave a small smile. Just water's fine. I turned to the sink, poured a glass, and handed it to him. When I looked up, he was watching me. Not just watching. Like he was trying to read a language I didn't know I was speaking. We ended up at the dining table, sharing slices of pepperoni and sipping from mismatched glasses. The candles flickered, casting shadows across his face. I asked about his studies, architecture, he said. He liked working with his hands. Said he spent his summers restoring old barns back in upstate New York. They creak when you walk across the floors, he said. But I like that. The history's in the bones. Something about that line stuck with me. I laughed and said, that's this house exactly. Older than it looks. He raised an eyebrow. I wasn't just talking about the house. My breath caught. I looked away too fast. He didn't push. Just leaned back and sipped his water. There was a silence after that, thick, humming. I asked if he was cold. He said no, but I still got up and turned on the fireplace, needing something to do with my hands. When I turned around, he was watching me again. Not hungrily, just intently. "You look different in this light," he said, voice low. "Not how I pictured you." "Pictured me?" He shrugged. "Jeremy talks about you. But he didn't say you had this glow." I laughed, awkward. "Glow? I'm wearing leggings and house slippers." "Still," he said. I felt my face flush. I crossed my arms. "You shouldn't say things like that." "Why not?" I stared at him. He didn't flinch. Didn't smile. Just waited. "Because I might believe you," I said, quieter than I meant to. He stood then, walked to the fireplace, crouched down, and adjusted the logs. I watched him move, slow, deliberate. Not for my benefit. That was the problem. He didn't even seem aware of how magnetic he was. Or maybe he did. Time slipped. I realized it had been almost an hour. I texted Jeremy. No reply. Dominic turned back toward me. He probably got distracted. Said something about stopping at Cassie's dorm. I rolled my eyes. Typical. "You want me to wait outside?" he asked. "Don't be silly. It's cold. Stay." He nodded. Then he did something strange. He sat on the rug by the fire instead of the chair. Looked up at me like I was the one visiting, not him. "You ever feel like you're invisible in your own house?" he asked. The question sliced deeper than it should have. I hesitated. Then. Every day. He didn't respond. Just looked at the flames, then back at me. "Not tonight." And then, silence again. Until we heard it. The click of the front door unlocking. "Mom?" Jeremy's voice. I stepped away from the fire, heart pounding like I'd been caught doing something I hadn't even done. My wine glass wobbled on the edge of the mantel. Dominic stood slowly, calm, collected. Jeremy burst into the living room, all smiles. "Dom, you beat me here. Your mom let me in. Hope that's okay." Jeremy grinned, oblivious. "Yeah, of course." He turned to me. "Sorry I'm late. Cassie's already did a room check, so we had to stall." I nodded. I don't think I even heard half of what he said. Because Dominic, standing behind him, met my eyes one last time. And the look he gave me wasn't innocent. It wasn't polite. It was a promise. Something had started. Something quiet, careful, and completely out of control. And God help me. I didn't want it to stop. The house smelled like burnt cinnamon and leftover chili the next morning. Jeremy was snoring on the couch, one arm dangling off the edge, the other clutching a throw pillow like it was a life raft. I stood in the kitchen, barefoot, staring at my reflection in the microwave door. I didn't look different, but I felt like a woman with a secret etched into her skin. Dominic had slept in the guest room. I heard him move around sometime around 1 a.m., the creak of the mattress, the low groan of old floorboards. I didn't sleep much after that. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the way he looked at me the night before. Like I was something precious he wasn't allowed to touch, but wanted to. And I hated how badly I wanted to be wanted. I made coffee. 2 mugs. One for me. One for him. I don't know why. Habit? Hope? Regret? He came in quietly, dressed in a faded gray t-shirt and jeans, barefoot, his hair still damp from a shower. He didn't say anything at first. Just walked over to the counter, took the mug I offered, and nodded once in thanks. "Morning," I said, trying to sound casual. "Morning." We sipped in silence. His voice finally broke it. "Did you sleep?" I shook my head. "You?" "Not really." We both knew why. Later that day, Mark called from a work trip in Phoenix. Asked how Jeremy was doing, how the weather was, if I'd remembered to send in the property taxes. The usual checklist of things that pass for conversation after 20 years. I gave the right answers. I always do. When I hung up, Dominic was outside, sitting on the back steps, sketchbook in his lap. I watched him through the glass door, thinking I'd turn away after a second. I didn't. I watched him sketch with long, confident strokes. Watched the way his hand moved. The way he bit his lip in concentration. He looked up suddenly, catching me. But he didn't look away. That night, the house felt colder. Jeremy went out to meet friends. Left around 6, said he'd be back late. I waved him off with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. It was just me and Dominic again. I poured wine. One glass became two. I put on music, something soft and nostalgic, something that filled the empty space between us. He sat across from me, his gaze steady. "This okay?" I asked, gesturing to the music. He nodded. "I like the way you set the mood." It wasn't what he said. It was how. The room changed after that. The shadows moved differently. Our laughter came slower, heavier. We sat too close. Our hands brushed when I reached for my glass. He didn't pull away. "Dominic." "Carla." He said my name like it meant something. I stood, suddenly restless. Walked to the window. "This is a bad idea." "Yeah," he said quietly behind me. "But it still feels good." I turned, my breath catching. And then, he stepped closer. He didn't touch me, but his presence filled the room like heat. His eyes searched mine for permission. And I gave it without saying a word. We crossed a line we couldn't uncross. We didn't kiss. We didn't even touch. But everything about us had changed. The next day was too bright. The sun poured into the kitchen like a spotlight. Jeremy was laughing over eggs, scrolling on his phone, telling me a story I couldn't follow. Dominic walked in behind him, casual, collected. But I felt it. The shift. He glanced at me once. And just like that, the world tilted. It unraveled 3 days later. Mark came home early. Didn't tell me he was flying back that night. Walked in with his suitcase and a strange look on his face. Said he'd gotten a weird feeling. Said he wanted to surprise me. He did. The camera in the den, our old baby monitor turned motion detector, had captured a moment. Me and Dominic. Standing too close. Too long. It wasn't proof. But it was enough. Mark didn't yell. He didn't cry. He just looked at me for a long, long time. Then said, "I don't know who you are anymore." He didn't sleep in our bed that night. He didn't say goodbye when he left the next morning. He just left the house key on the table. Dominic texted once. "Are you okay?" I never replied. I couldn't. Because the truth was, I wasn't. But I also wasn't sorry. Mark left the ring. I left everything else.